All right, welcome back. Unfortunately, a quick change to the agenda. Maggie, CEO of Nobel Foods, fell ill with the flu and out of kindness did not want to come this evening. Fortunately, a number of you have come up to me and said you wanted to hear more from me, so I will be interviewing Kristin Bresnahan, General Counsel of Nobel Foods. Kristin is an old friend, so I am really excited to bring her out and welcome her to the Berkeley Forum. So you all may noticed I've been taking pictures and posting on Twitter. Since I'm also on the stage, I am going to do a quick selfie of Kristin and I, and we'll post that. Okay, let's get started. So the topic of this evening, and we recognize that we stand between all of you and the cocktail reception, and I hope everyone at home is prepared with a drink to toast a successful first day. But today's topic is reimagining the global food system, which is a really interesting space. And we're going to dive into some legal questions, some governance questions. But Kristin, I'm wondering if you can kick things off by telling us a bit more about Nobel Foods and how you are reimagining the global food system.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. As a proud Berkeley alum, it is fabulous to be back and to be at this great event. So at Nobel Foods, we are reimagining the food system in a very exciting way. We are doing and tackling what we like to call the holy grail of plant-based or animal-free food category, which is a delicious, stretchy, melty cheese that has the same nutritional attributes as the animal alternative, but doesn't require an animal to be made. And so that's what we're going after. And in order to do that, we are creating a new technology platform that we call plant-grown proteins. What does that mean? So we actually teach plants to make these genetically identical dairy proteins in their seeds, and then we're able to grow that protein, and then make cheese from those seeds that have, again, all of the same properties that you love about cheese: melt, stretch, mouthfeel, taste, all of that if you've tried any of the products on the market that are trying to fill that void right now are falling very short on. And the plant piece of this is very important because it allows us to achieve another very important piece of our mission. One very important piece of our mission is a climate solution. So how do we make these products that we all love without involving the animal, which is a huge emitter and a very problematic from a climate perspective. And the other part of our mission is really, how do we do that in a way that is super accessible to more people than just the 1% or the very elite who actually have disposable income to spend on those alternatives. And so the technology platform that we've created really allows us to do that to scale. And Maggie, our founder and CEO, who was supposed to be here today, and she's very, very sad that she can't be, when she really thought about tackling this problem, that's one of the lenses that she was looking at it through. How do we solve this problem in a way that actually makes an impact and will allow everyone to access it? And so the plant-grown piece is a super important part of that. The food tech space, and I think this happens in a lot of spaces, it's not just food tech, kind of misses a big part of this conversation, which is that to make climate-friendly choices, it's really a privilege that many of us are able to do that, and a lot of people are not able to do that. So who really can afford to buy a Tesla? Who really can afford to buy plant-based cheese that is, at this point, and we've looked at all of the data, 2.5 times more expensive than the animal commodity counterpart? So if you're really trying to make a difference and drive impact and not have consumers be making real sacrifices that they truly cannot make in many cases, you have to close that gap.
Yeah.
And the technology solutions that were out there, as she was trying to tackle this problem and think about how can we get at this, the technologies that were out there were not competitive on that point. So there's plant-based products which really just use ingredients that are out there already to formulate new products, so like Beyond Meat or a lot of the plant-based cheese alternatives that are on the market now. Yeah. Fermentation systems, which are in big bioreactors, like how a lot of pharmaceuticals are made. you can do the same thing, make these proteins in those systems, but it's extremely expensive to scale. And it really, you're not going to get there and make that impact if you're using that technology. And the same on like a cultivated meat or like using real animal cells to then create products. Again, very expensive technology to scale. So for us, the plant is the very cheap little mini bioreactor that we're able to use to really get at this part of our mission on the accessibility side. So that was a long answer, but that's what we do.
I love it. And I think, though, when we think about the global food system, it's not necessarily the best products or the healthiest products that we consume. It's those that are ubiquitous, those that have reached mass market. We don't consume corn syrup because it's the best, healthiest ingredient. We consume corn syrup because of subsidies and primaries, and it's complicated, right? And so let's assume for a minute you've created the best technology. I know you have. How are you successful from there? How do you still address a global food system that isn't necessarily about what's best tasting, most healthy?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I mean, it starts there, though. I mean, that to us is the first goal, is to kind of what I was talking about before. The consumer has to make zero sacrifice. So if you want people to actually change their behavior, you have to give them an alternative that requires zero sacrifice on taste, on convenience, on price. Yeah. So that's, for us, that's where we start. And we're building, we have a very complex business because we're building really the technology platform from the lab all the way through to a branded product that we're going to be selling CPG, one day CPG product, but through food service, in the meantime. And that's table stakes, is to get to that point. We hope that over time we'll be able to, with that impact that we can show, get to a place where we're able to permeate these other areas where it becomes more ubiquitous. But it's very challenging. As I'm sure many of you know, there are tons of subsidies. There's a lot of politics around food. We don't have time to go into that in this short session, but it is a space rife with places to get tripped up on that. And so for us, we're really focused first on taste, price, convenience.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun, earlier today we had the former CEO of American Airlines and kind of discussing a mature industry and how to address politics and regulation. And I think it's fun to contrast it with you and a developing industry, a newer company. So I love to come back to that. And I will say I've seen some of your early marketing. It's great. So excited to see what happens. Here's why I invited Kristin. It's a well-known secret that the best job in law is to be executive director of a business law center. And Kristin and I were classmates in law school, and she was, prior to this role, executive director of Columbia's Business Law Center. Now, Columbia, not as good of a school as Berkeley, but a great school. And surprised you left that job. This is the best job in law, and you left it to become general counsel of a company that, granted, raised from a very impressive VC, but just did one round. It was a little early for most companies don't hire a GC. You also took on, you were, I think, chief people officer, chief administrative officer, chief regulatory officer. We're risk adverse. You had a great job. Why'd you leave?
Yeah, great question. And that was a very fun job at Columbia. I was inspired by Adam, I have to admit. Don't know if I would have taken that job if I hadn't seen all the amazing things he had done at Berkeley. I was super passionate about getting into this space. I mean, that is the short answer. Yeah. I had wanted to get into this space from even before I went and took that job at Columbia. I had learned, it was a personal passion of mine around the mission of how do we get animals out of the food system and make a more sustainable and humane food system for a while. And this space was really starting to blossom. And I was super excited about it. And when this opportunity came along, it was an easy decision, despite the risk, potentially. But really, it's been an amazing opportunity for me. As Adam mentioned, I've worn many hats. I still continue to wear multiple hats. I lead legal, regulatory, government affairs. I was leading the people function as well for over 2 years. I recently stopped doing that. But I think as lawyers, we have an incredible breadth of skills that we don't even realize. I think a lot of times we're trained to think that we have a very niche skill set and we specialize. And then, when you go in-house, and especially for early stage companies, when you come in as, the first lawyer, so much of what you do isn't necessarily just strictly legal. In my case, that's definitely been true, but I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and that's the case there for them as well. And there's so much that we can offer. And I think Maggie, if she were here, would tell you that when she was looking to hire someone right after the Series A was raised, lawyer was at the kind of the top of her mind because there were so many things that needed to get done, building out an IP portfolio, building up a regulatory strategy, building up all the processes and everything that the company needed just to be able to be organized and move forward. And while I had never done any of those things before, I was a trained lawyer and had a wide range of skills that I could deploy against all of those different things. And as lawyers, we are constantly learning. When we're dropped into something, we have to learn deep industry expertise quickly. We have to serve our clients in so many different ways. So that kind of came naturally to just dive in and become an expert very fast.
Well, for me, your story's inspirational, and I will say to all of our younger lawyers and older lawyers and everyone else in the room, since I've known you, since you were a big law attorney, you spent your free time going to conferences in this space, approaching chefs in New York that were passionate about alternative food sources, and so your kind of this dream opportunity came to fruition, and so come to conferences like this, pursue your passion, even if it's a hobby, because you'll never know when it could become a full-time thing, and I just see you killing it. So I'm so proud that you've been able to do that.
That's very nice.
Kristin, I come from the venture space, and I advise a lot of startups at Berkeley and beyond, and often get the question, when should I hire a chief legal officer or a GC? And in most cases, I would say Series A, post-Series A is too early, and you joined Nobel Foods right after the Series A, with the exception of cases where kind of legal questions, regulatory questions are central to the business model, and I think that's the case in Nobel. So can you talk a bit about that and kind of why it made sense for you all?
Yes, I'm a big proponent of hiring a legal or regulatory person very early on, obviously, based on my experience. I think in highly regulated industries, it becomes even more important, again, because lawyers can flex in a bunch of different areas, and you don't often have budget to be hiring super specialized expertise in all of these different areas early on. And the legal expertise that you can bring along, all these other things that you do, can overlay on so many different areas and really set you up for success. Even the governance piece, as early stage startups, the governance piece, you're not, it's pretty straightforward. You have but to be able to work with your CEO, and again, if Maggie were here, we could be talking about this, but I've been able to, I think, educate her in a lot of ways around the governance piece. How do we work with the board? What do we need to be doing with the board now? We're a very mission-driven company. How do we make sure that the board is coming along with that journey? And I mean, that's another discussion. How do you make sure you have the right people in the room and the investors and that support all of that, which maybe we can talk about in a minute. But I think hiring a lawyer early on can be very, very valuable, and in highly regulated spaces, even more so. And probably when I came on is definitely a little bit early, but I'm seeing it more and more. I'm part of a group of a lot of GCs of tech companies, and you see it, especially within biotech and life sciences, you see it more and more.
Harvard, another inferior school to Berkeley, came out with the study years back where they looked at CEOs and compared the performance of CEOs with legal training versus CEOs with traditional, let's say, MBAs. And they found that CEOs of companies in industries that were heavily regulated, those with legal backgrounds outperformed their peers. So I guess the next best thing to not being a CEO lawyer is hiring a lawyer early on.
That's great.
You get
That's
it all.
good to know.
Yeah.
I love that data point.
So a constant theme throughout today and even the conference last year has been this push towards stakeholder capitalism, right? This idea that we've shifted or are starting to shift away from shareholder primacy to a view that corporations should be accountable to multi-stakeholders, from communities to governments to employees. I think there's also a strong belief that these are part and parcel, that we, in corporate governance can have it all. What's in the best interest of stakeholders is in the best long-term, at least, interest of shareholders. And so Nobel is a mission-driven company. You're reimagining the global food system to make it more sustainable. And I'm sure you've discussed a world where, is there a situation where those goals may conflict with the goals of traditional investors, for example, who may want you to pursue an acquisition from an acquirer or earlier than you expect to? And so how do you think about that when you're building the company?
Yeah, I mean, and that, to my point earlier, starts with your investors that you bring on early. I think there was a lot of, before I even joined, so when the Series A was raised in seed money, Maggie was very cognizant of that and thought very hard about who she was going to take money from and how that would line up against what we're doing. What we're doing is very complicated. So from a scientific perspective and then from a scale, all of the pieces that have to come along with that, and it takes time. And so you want to align yourself with investors that understand that and that are mission aligned to the extent that you can get there. So our earliest money came from very mission aligned investors, a fund called New Crop Capital that invests in alternative proteins. And that kind of set the stage. And then during the Series A, it was the same thing. A lot of focus on who are we going to bring in the room, who are we going to take money from and have around the table. And one of our largest investors is Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is Bill Gates' climate fund. Yeah. It's a climate solutions fund. So what they're looking for, even before they invest, is how much greenhouse gas emission are you going to offset or remove? That's one of their biggest drivers in terms of investment decisions. And so they have a longer term view. Their funds have longer timelines so that they can wait it out and be very aligned in that mission. So that's been very important for us, and including around in the boardroom, we have those investors around the table. One thing that I think I learned from my time working a lot with corporate governance when I was at Columbia and sitting in rooms with directors and really thinking through all of these issues around stakeholder capitalism and is what does that look like in the boardroom? How do you bring the board along with that? And so that's something that I've really tried to influence as we bring that mission, that value creation that is coming from our mission. I mean, what our product, our marketing, all of that, the value to the consumer is tied to our mission. Yeah. So that's the value that we're creating. And so to make sure that that's being clear and that's being driven through all of the strategy so that some opportunity that comes along that's not necessarily aligned with the mission and where we're trying to go would be value destructive in a lot of ways, and how that's all baked together. Obviously, that's there's a million different permutations of what that could look like, and we'll have to navigate those as they come. We haven't been faced with that. But for now, it's laying the groundwork, the strategy, and integrating all of those things together that will allow us to hopefully weather those storms when they eventually come. Yeah. Hopefully they won't, but we'll see.
And how have you built your regulatory, what has been your regulatory approach? Who are your regulators? And then I guess a second part of that question is, how have you addressed, one of the big challenges in entrepreneurship and building disruptive startups is coming up against the kind of entrenched industry, and arguably big food, if that's what we call it, is as big and scary as they come, and very entrenched. So two-part question: how have you approached kind of building out a regulatory capacity, and then how do you think about kind of how does that impact or interact with the entrenched players in the space?
Yes, our regulatory approach has been very much a partnership with the regulators. So we have not taken the approach, nor do we have that's just not an option for us to do what other companies do, which is to just not engage and then figure it out later. That's not what we're doing. We have a very collaborative approach. We have two regulatory agencies that we work with: the USDA, because we're working in crops that are being grown, and FDA, who for food safety, they have jurisdiction over all of that. So we have been partnering very closely with them, and that's been our strategy. We've built up now more expertise on that team. I still lead that, but we have now more expertise from several very big ag companies, and that's been so very collaborative is the answer. Yeah. In terms of the industry relations, one of the huge advantages that we have is that we actually work with farmers. So we're growing crops, plants that need to be grown in the same way that they're being grown now. I mean, we have some extra stuff that we do that's a little bit different than certain commodity crops, but the farmer is a very important part of our mission. And so we're plugging into that system in a way that a lot of companies in the food tech world or alternative protein world are not. Yeah. And that's allowed us to have a very different relationship with, conversation with the farming groups, the industries, the different crops that we're growing in, and so we can plug into that in a totally different way and be part of a new opportunity, new solutions for farmers, ways to diversify the money, what they're making, what crops they're putting in the ground, and all of that. So we have a big advantage in that way that we are leveraging to improve to get in with the industry.
Winners and losers, regulators, go. I'm just kidding.
I'm not falling into that trap.
Another theme from today has been kind of just looking at what's happening on a macro level in Silicon Valley, and we've discussed how there's still plenty of dry capital in the venture world, but we're seeing a lot of startups just kind of gear up for avoiding fundraising out of fears of doing a down or even a flat round. I think Nobell was in a good position in that you did your Series B prior to some of this turmoil. But as a leader of a company that's entering an uncertain market, how has that changed your management of the company?
Yeah, it definitely, we were fortunate in the timing of that, how things shook out, but we, like every other company, we're looking closely at everything that we're doing, what's necessary, what can we pull back on to extend runway. The longer that we can push that out and see how this all goes, the better off we'll be. So that's what we're doing. We have not had to do any major pullback, and we're ramping up a lot of the downstream, the scale up, or looking to get a product out on the market next year. So there's a lot that goes into that, and kind of the back end, and we're doing everything we can to just make sure that happens. And for us, that's the priority is getting the product out. And we think once that's there, we'll be very well positioned to raise. But it's a tough time. I mean, especially in companies like ours that are extremely capital intensive. When you talk about biotech, life sciences, you need a lot of money to do what we're doing, and that can be very challenging in times like these when that's harder to come by.
What's hiring look like? Because I know for the past couple of years that's been a big challenge. It's just finding and recruiting talent. Has that started to shift? Are you still hiring?
Yeah, we are. It's softened a little bit, but not as much as I would have expected based on what I read. It's the war for talent, especially, again, within biotech and life sciences, a lot of us are looking for the same types of talent. So we're based in South San Francisco, along with every other biotech company. There's the war for the best talent is ongoing, but it has gotten a little bit better.
Okay, Kristin, last question. You've been a startup exec now for a few years. What's surprised you about it?
Oh my God.
What hasn't surprised you about it?
Yeah. What surprised me has been, number one, hiring, how hard it's been. I think I was leading the people function, as Adam said, for a couple of years during these times when it was so hard to find good talent. The market was so tight. So that has surprised me, just how difficult it is to hire people. I think the other thing for us, our business, like I mentioned, is so complex because we have, from teams of scientists that are in the lab developing all the technology all the way through, a final product that we're actually branding and marketing ourselves. There's a lot involved in all of that. It's bringing together a lot of worlds that don't usually exist in one company. And so finding the right people to be able to take all of that forward from a leadership level, that you can't just hire expertise in each of those different things. So people who can really flex across those different environments is super important. And working in a startup is very different than working in a lot of other environments. And so we have these niche needs that we need for our company. And our original thought was kind of okay, we'll go to the best, the big ag companies that are doing this, or that these CPG companies that are doing this in this space, and just realized after a couple times, that's not really what we should be optimizing for. Because working in those places, not that you can't necessarily do it, but it's just a very different environment. It's not for everyone to be in a startup environment where it's it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of tight deadlines, and it's wearing a lot of hats without a lot of guidance a lot of times on what you need to do.
More pressure than the bar exam?
Yeah, I had to take the California bar last year, so that was another not so fun experience, but
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
So, okay, last question, because you're passionate about this space. So imagine, assuming we're all still here, but you come back in 15 years at the 2038 Corporate Governance Forum. What does our diet look like? What does food systems look like? What do you hope it looks like?
I hope it looks different than it does now. I hope it looks the same, but you don't realize that all the sourcing of where it came from is totally different. And I think that that's just going to be a reality that we all face. I mean, the food system is under so much pressure. I think we saw a lot of that during COVID. The climate realities are just they're just changing the realities of what's happening on the ground and how we all have to eat. So I think, and there's a lot of companies innovating in this space. So I'm hoping that you will get to enjoy all of the things that you eat now and they all come from no animal involved, but you don't even know the difference.
And we're rooting for you. And when do we get to try?
Next year.
Okay. Well, we'll
You'll
bring you back.
be on the lookout. Yeah, I'll
And we'll do a
definitely make sure
tasting.
that this group knows.
Well, Kristin, I want to thank you for helping me close out day one.
Thank you, everyone,
This is
for staying
fantastic.
late. Thank you.
To all of you joining us virtually, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. I hope that you can go and enjoy a drink, some time with your family. For everyone in the room, we'll conclude with our cocktail reception just outside the main ballroom. As a reminder, CLE credit, make sure you check in with the front before you leave. My last thank you to all of our speakers, all of our sponsors, and the incredible staff that made today possible. We'll see everyone back tomorrow.